Imagine walking into a room and saying nothing. No explanation. No attempt to impress. No effort to fill the silence. Yet somehow, your presence shifts the atmosphere. People glance. Conversations pause. Tension forms, not out of fear, but from a quiet, unexplainable weight. What is that? Power. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that bends a room with stillness. Niccolo Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher and political strategist, understood this silent kind of power better than anyone. He knew that in a world obsessed with control and dominance, those who speak less often hold more sway, because silence is not emptiness. Silence is restraint. Silence is signal. Silence is strategy. But most people fear silence. In conversation, they rush to fill gaps. In conflict, they explain too much. In uncertainty, they reveal their hands before it's time. Why? Because silence makes us feel exposed. Vulnerable. Out of control. But Machiavelli saw silence differently. He saw it as a tool, not a deception, but a protection. Not a manipulation, but of leverage. In The Prince, he writes, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But what is fear in this context? Not terror, not violence. But the unknown, and silence creates the unknown. When you say less, others imagine more. They fill in the blanks with their own projections, and that is a powerful position to hold. Because control isn't always about domination. Sometimes it's about ambiguity. The one who reveals less holds more. But this isn't about playing games. It's about learning the rarest form of discipline, self-control. In a world that rewards noise, speaking first, speaking loud, speaking constantly, to remain quiet is to reclaim your agency. To observe before acting. To listen before reacting. To hold presence without explanation. And that restraint, over time, becomes gravity. People start to notice that you don't over-explain, that you don't need to be right, that you don't reveal everything you know. And in doing so, you become unpredictable, not because you hide, but because you do not bleed out your energy for approval. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting. It's the one watching, the one listening, the one who doesn't flinch. But this kind of power doesn't come from suppression. It comes from clarity. You don't stay silent to punish. You stay silent to choose. To choose what deserves your voice, what earns your energy, what requires a response. And in that choosing, you stop reacting to every trigger. You start acting with precision. You stop chasing control and start embodying it. This is the paradox Machiavelli laid bare. True influence often comes from absence, not presence. From pause, not persuasion. From restraint, not force. There's a reason ancient strategists revered stillness. In Eastern philosophy, the concept of wu wei, effortless action, mirrors this idea. To act without forcing, to influence without imposing. Machiavelli, too, understood that perception is often more powerful than direct confrontation. A silent leader leaves space for others to reveal themselves. They watch who interrupts, who overcompensates, who leaks their intentions without realizing it. And in watching, they gather power, because silence doesn't mean inaction. It means gathering attention, data, leverage. And when the time to speak arrives, it lands like a stone in still water. It echoes, not because it was loud. But because it was rare. In a world flooded with noise, silence becomes a signal of strength. People don't question the loudest voice. They question the quiet one. They wonder, what do they know? What are they thinking? What are they holding back? And that wondering is where your power lives. But this silence must be rooted in substance. It's not about being vague. It's about being intentional. You must know who you are. You must know what you value. You must know what is worth responding to and what is not. Then your silence is no longer hesitation. It's posture. It's awareness made visible. And from that posture, you begin to live strategically, not performative. So ask yourself, where do you speak from fear? Where do you fill space to feel safe? Where do you chase clarity for others at the cost of your own? Silence, when chosen, becomes your sanctuary, and that sanctuary is not a prison. It is power. And that's when your presence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. There's a strange discomfort in being misunderstood. We instinctively want to clarify, to explain, to defend. To make others see us accurately, or at least favorably. But what if misunderstanding is a weakness? What if it's leverage? Machiavelli believed that clarity is not always to your advantage. In fact, He warned against being too transparent, too legible, because once people think they fully understand you, they stop watching you closely. You become predictable, expected, controllable, and predictable people are easier to defeat. That's why mystery, the deliberate absence of explanation, is often a more potent strategy than argument. A prudent man should always follow in the footsteps of great men and imitate those who have been supreme, so that if he is not successful, at least he will have done everything in his power to succeed. To Machiavelli, success wasn't about being loved or even liked. It was about maintaining influence, and that often meant keeping others guessing. Because the unknown is harder to attack. When you withhold your full story, others must speculate, and that speculation creates space for ambiguity space for caution, space where others hesitate to act because they're not quite sure where you stand. This isn't manipulation it's restraint strategic silence isn't about hiding who you are it's about not giving away more than is necessary, because when people can't predict you, they can't preempt you. Your presence begins to shape the room not by volume, but by weight. You become a question mark in a world addicted to answers, and question marks are powerful. They draw attention. They inspire curiosity. They require others to lean in. But there's something deeper beneath all this. Mystery protects your energy. When you stop over-explaining, you conserve power. You no longer need to justify yourself. You no longer dilute your intent by trying to manage perceptions. Instead, you operate from within, anchored, calm, precise. This is not emotional distance. It's emotional discipline, and it's rare because most people bleed energy through excess. Too much talking, too much justifying, too much disclosure. But Machiavelli knew, the less they know, the more they wonder. The more they wonder, the more power you hold. This doesn't mean being cold. It means being clean with your presence. You speak when it matters. You act when it counts. And the rest of the time, you let the silence do the work. Think about the people who have left the deepest impression on you. Were they the ones who told you everything, or the ones who said very little, but when they did, it mattered? You remember them not because they filled space, but because they honored it. Machiavelli believed in the value of holding back, not to deceive, but to remain flexible. Because when you are too legible, you limit yourself. Others begin to define you. They categorize you, and eventually, they dismiss you. But when you remain partially unknown, when you allow space between your truth and their assumptions, you remain alive in their imagination. You become a puzzle they want to solve. And while they're busy guessing, you're busy moving. This is the essence of strategic opacity. It gives you time. It gives you space. It gives you protection, because people can only attack what they can define. They can only argue with what you reveal. So by speaking less, you leave less on the table. This doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means becoming intentional. Let people underestimate you. Let them assume. Let them project their narratives onto your silence, while you remain quietly 3 steps ahead. You're not withholding out of fear. You're conserving for precision, because the right words, spoken at the right moment, carry the force of thunder, but said too soon, they're lost in noise. So you learn to wait. You learn to observe. You realize that power isn't always about having the answer. Sometimes it's about watching others trip over their own certainty, and in doing so, you remain rooted. Not defensive. Not reactive. Not easily moved. This is where true strategy lives, in the pause before the response, in the gaze that sees without needing to be seen, in the choice not to reveal, because presence alone is enough. And that's the irony. You don't have to be seen to be known. You don't have to speak to be heard. You just have to stop giving everything away. Power, like silence, grows in the dark, quietly, patiently, invisibly, until one day it becomes undeniable. Imagine a moment of tension. Someone insults you, someone challenges you, someone tries to provoke a reaction, and you say nothing, not out of fear, not because you're weak, but because you choose not to give your power away. That choice, the decision not to react, is one of the rarest and most powerful responses in existence. Machiavelli understood that silence is not just strategic in speech, it is essential in emotion, because when others can trigger your reactions, they control you, they dictate your mood, they dictate your energy. They dictate your moves. And Machiavelli believed that true power belongs to the person who cannot be easily provoked. A man who wishes to profess at all times honesty and virtue must come to grief among so many who are not honest. He wasn't promoting dishonesty. He was describing reality, a reality in which you must learn not just how to act, but how not to react. Because reactivity is exposure. It reveals what matters to you. It shows where you're wounded. It signals where your energy is weak, and once others can map your emotions, they can manipulate them. This is why emotional neutrality, not coldness, but composure, is one of the greatest forms of defense. It allows you to observe without absorbing, to see clearly, even in chaos. To think clearly, even in pressure. But neutrality is a natural. It must be cultivated. It requires a deep understanding of your own emotional landscape. It demands the ability to pause, to breathe, to hold tension without spilling it. Because anyone can shout, anyone can rage, anyone can clap back. But the one who can remain still in the fire, that is the one who shapes the outcome. Not because they dominate the moment, but because they control the tempo, and controlling tempo are the essence of influence. In politics, in war, in relationships, the one who controls the pace controls the game. And silence, emotional silence, slows the game down. It forces others to wait. To wonder. To second guess. And in their hesitation, you gain ground. But this discipline doesn't come from suppression. It comes from sovereignty. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer need to match noise with noise. You let others exhaust themselves in performance while you conserve your energy. And in doing so, you become the still point in a spinning world. Stillness isn't weakness. It's containment. It's knowing that your power does not increase when you display it. It increases when you manage it. People mistake silence for submission, but often it's the sign of someone holding a sword behind their back and simply choosing not to draw it yet. Machiavelli knew this. He understood that reaction is often the very thing your enemies seek. They want your anger. They want your panic. They want your emotional display, because once they have it, they can map your moves. But the one who does not flinch becomes unreadable. And unreadable people are dangerous, not because they threaten, but because they can't be cornered. In a world where emotions are weaponized, emotional neutrality is protection. You don't give people fuel to twist your words. You don't feed those who seek conflict. You don't fall into traps designed to make you look unbalanced. You remain calm. Collected. Grounded. This does not mean you are indifferent. It means you know the value of your energy and you refuse to waste it. Think about this. Every reaction costs energy. Every outburst leaks your focus. Every argument hands over your center. But the composed person, they hold their center. They move by choice, not by impulse. And in that stillness, they often become the unexpected victor, because people underestimate the silent. They assume stillness means passivity. They confuse calm with weakness. Until one moment, one word, one move, one decision shifts everything. And suddenly, the quiet person is the one everyone is watching, not because they forced attention, but because they commanded it. Through patience, precision, and discipline. So the next time tension rises, pause, let others speak first. Let emotion swirl, and then, when the moment is right, you move, not with noise, but with impact. That is how power speaks, softly, rarely, and unmistakably. In the end, the most powerful people in any room are the ones who do not need to prove they belong there. They know who they are, they choose when to reveal it, and in their silence, they remind the world. Power doesn't shout. It doesn't scramble. It doesn't need permission. It simply is. So what happens when silence becomes more than a reaction? When it turns into a way of being, a quiet command of the room, an inner state of self-possession that doesn't need applause, that's when silence becomes strategy. Not temporary, not performative, but integrated, natural. You no longer use silence as a trick. You live it as a truth, because you've realized something most never do. You don't need to win every conversation to win the game. Machiavelli understood this. He observed the court. He studied rulers. He saw that words often became weapons, but silence was armor. He didn't preach virtue. He studied power. And what he found was this: those who spoke the least often lasted the longest. Not because they said nothing, but because they spoke only when it mattered. And when they did, people listened. Because silence before speech gives words weight. It creates suspense. It signals intention. It amplifies meaning. This is what it means to hold court, not through volume, but through presence. When you cultivate inner stillness, you stop rushing to prove. You no longer need to control the narrative. You become the narrative others try to interpret. This is the essence of what Machiavelli taught. Power is not about dominance. It's about direction, and silence, used wisely, directs more than most commands ever could. But how do you embody this? How do you live as a quiet strategist in a noisy world? First, you learn the value of timing. You speak last. You observe first. You wait until the right word, at the right moment, can shift the entire tone of the room. Second, you master stillness in emotion. In negotiation, in conflict, in love, you don't rush to fix. You don't try to overpower. You remain anchored. And from that grounded place, you make choices, not reactions, because what you don't say is often more powerful than what you do. This is not about being passive. It's about being precise. Silence allows you to gather information. It allows others to reveal themselves. It invites projection, and through that, you see what others fear, want, and assume. And when you understand that, you understand how to move. In the final part of this philosophy, Machiavelli would remind you, true power doesn't demand. It doesn't explain. It listens. It observes. It chooses, and only when necessary, it acts. Think about real influence. It's not the person who dominates the room. It's the one who speaks, and everything stops. Not because they demand attention, but because their silence built anticipation. This is how leaders emerge, not from noise, but from discipline, from the ability to sit in discomfort while others scramble to be seen, from the strength to observe without needing to be the center. You don't need to out-talk anyone. You just need to outweigh them, because the loudest person in the room often exposes their limits. But the quiet one, they become the unknown. And the unknown always holds power. This is how you reclaim your energy, by remembering that not every invitation to speak deserves an answer, that not every act requires a defense, that not every moment needs your voice. Sometimes it needs your stillness, and when you live this way, your presence begins to carry meaning. Even in silence, people sense your awareness. They sense your discernment. They sense that you don't move carelessly. And that awareness, they begin to respect you, not because you forced it, but because you embody it. That is Machiavellian power, not loud, not boastful, but deliberate. Measured. Enduring. So here is the quiet truth. You don't need to speak to assert your power. You only need to know when your silence says everything. Let others rush, let others unravel. You wait. Watch. Choose. Because those who master silence and chase the world, they shape it. Because the loudest one in the room is rarely the one in control.